we are really seeing the culmination of a 30 some odd year, probably 40, but really a 30 some odd year agenda by the right wing in this country to roll back the Voting Rights Act. John Roberts, the Chief Justice, had the Voting Rights Act in his sights as a lawyer in the Reagan administration 30 years ago, and now he's in a position to start that rollback by starting with Section 5, which is the pre-clearance provision of the Voting Rights Act. And it's just it really is amazing to watch Scalia get up there and make the case. His case is far more naked, that the idea that we would somehow protect the power of African American voting rights and the power of other minority, non-English speaking, perhaps, people's voting rights as an ongoing perpetuation of a racial entitlement.
Right.
I mean, this is.
I mean, using that term is so unbelievable. A racial entitlement to be able to vote. You know, it just reminds me of his decision in Lawrence versus Texas. You know, there's no protection for people's behavior. The state should be able to basically ban homosexuals from engaging in, kissing each other, doing anything. As far as he's got such a distorted 17th century. I mean, his view on guns being an individual right. Every historian who has a clue would tell him he has no idea what he's talking about on Citizens United and campaign finance law. I mean, this guy basically, and he always says the same thing. I remember on the healthcare law. He's like, well, what about the Cornhusker kickback with Ben Nelson?
Right.
And I was like, what are you are you Rush Limbaugh?
Yeah.
Or are you a judge on the highest court? Do you deal in law, or are you making a political statement? It doesn't matter how the bill got passed. That's, by the way, sir, that's none of your freaking business. What matters is whether it's constitutional or not. All right? It doesn't matter who is making deals in back rooms, which people do. I mean, this guy is on the highest court in the land is really such a cruel joke because he's Rush Limbaugh in a robe. That's all he is. And the racial entitlements part of it, I mean, that he would. I mean, then Alito, I think, joined in with him. Like, well, why should it only apply to these places? Aren't we discriminating against them? Shouldn't it be everywhere else? I got two answers to you. It applies to them because they had a history of unbelievable discrimination. And yes, why don't we extend it everywhere else?
Yes.
Why don't we stop the Republicans in Hamilton County here in Ohio from trying to stop people from voting? Why don't we stop Scott Walker and his buddies in Wisconsin from doing it? Why don't we extend it to Pennsylvania where they pass this ridiculous ID law? I think it's a great idea, Justice Alito. Let's make it every state to make sure we really prevent this.
This gets into their relationship with lawmakers because Scalia made a big issue of like who could possibly vote. The fact that you've actually seen more majorities and almost a unanimity in reauthorizing the Voting Rights Act became evidence to Scalia that we no longer need this because there's no resistance to it, and it's just that in some way lawmakers are being bullied by public perception into voting for this. And if
because it sounds good, it's who would go against that? That's none of your freaking business, pal.
It's stunning. And if you want to throw it back to the legislature and make it and say that you really do need to make this conform to some notion, then they should be obligated to throw it back to the Senate and the House and say, you've got 2 years, and this is something that we see judges do. You've got 2 years, legislature, to make this comport to a better constitutional framework, which would be either scrap the whole thing or impose this preclearance across the country. And that would be an interesting dynamic. They know, of course, at that point, they still would have to, that I believe, that you still would see some type of reauthorization or that it would put the Republican Party in some type of disadvantage electorally.
But it doesn't really matter because, as we know, Scalia is just a hack and a liar. Right. And so, if that were his real interest, then yeah, he would do that and say, well, let's see if you can apply it to the whole country. But if he really, if in the end, his whole view of things were more that way, well, then maybe Bush v. Gore gets figured out a little differently, doesn't it? right?
Yeah.
But the reason why is Scalia, to his eternal shame, although he's got so much eternal shame, I don't know where the list begins and ends. It was more important that Bush's rights be protected, as he said in that decision that, of course, would never extend anywhere else, his equal rights, than the rights of everybody who actually was, taking the time to vote.
Right.
And so, I mean, this is a transparent, as it always is transparent with him. People have to give him the benefit of the doubt because he gets the benefit of wearing a robe. Otherwise, this guy, again, would just be a right-wing talk radio host you would laugh at because there's no logic in any of his decisions. It's certainly not based on historical precedent. Again, this is so utterly ridiculous. As if we need to be reminded, we need. I guess we'll need more details to find out exactly what happened. But the first openly gay African American who was running for mayor in a city in Mississippi was just murdered.
Yep.
And they're quite suspicious right now. It's because, guess what? He was openly gay and African American. So obviously none of that stuff ever happens anymore, right?
Right.
I mean, there's complete racial equality. You don't hear a different, backbench Republican in a different state legislature around the country saying every day about how abortion's aimed at eliminating black babies and, things like that. We never hear any of that stuff. We don't have, Dove, whatever the hell his name is up there in your neck of the woods, Hivekind or whatever, putting on blackface for Purim, right? I mean, there's definitely no racial issues. No, we're all one big happy family now in America. Let's just get rid of it.
It's stunning.